Hello everyone, I am Carl Churchill. Before I start, I do want to acknowledge the land on which Oklahoma City now resides is the traditional home of the Caddo Nation, the Wichita-affiliated tribes, and a hunting ground, trading ground, and migration route for the Apache, Comanche, Kiowa, and Osage nations. Today, 39 tribal nations dwell in the state of Oklahoma because of settler colonial policies designed to assimilate them. I am a cartographer with the Woodwell Climate Research Center, a climate science NGO based out of Massachusetts. We focus on discussing the nature of the ongoing climate crisis and promoting action to help mitigate its effects. Cartography is a core part of this strategy. The climate crisis is happening now, which means adapting to events as they happen, working with our scientific staff to understand these crises, and producing maps on a quick timetable. That includes static maps like the one shown here, or an entire series of maps like for a story map on Arctic climate change. With this sort of environment, it is vital to be able to work quickly without compromising quality. Simultaneously this past year, I wanted to participate in the 30-day map challenge. I had first participated in the challenge in 2019 before I was hired full-time. Once the 2021 was coming up, I realized that I had to balance my work responsibilities with the demands of producing a finished map every single day. I discovered that the two complemented each other perfectly. I could apply lessons and ideas from one to the other. Lessons I'm excited to share today, but I first want to set some boundaries. This presentation is not about the larger ethical questions around map data, the appropriateness of designing a map for a particular message, or the use of that map in a larger project. Don't ever think that maps have to be made fast, always. Not every map can be completed. Not every map can be completed quickly. And when I say fast, I do not mean sloppy. If you're having to go back again, you're actually burning more time than if you did it a little bit more slowly the first time. If you are working efficiently, it means you're able to spend more time where it can be used best on creative decisions. I've divided this presentation into two groups, principles in blue and practicals in orange. I've used probably 30 different types of software in my short career. Despite this, the larger theories and concepts of good design and workflow remain the same. Every time you see blue, it's a practice I believe holds true regardless, and orange is simply how I'm using that in my personal work. There is this concept in cooking called mise en place, which is French for putting in place. You take all the ingredients for your dish, prepare them ahead of time, so when you start cooking, you can focus on just that, rather than burning time down hunting stuff in the fridge. In cartography, this means having usable data on hand and software customized to suit our workflows. This is having our ingredients prepared and our oven preheated. Natural Earth is an excellent public data set that I'm sure many people here are familiar with or made. I have the entire Natural Earth database downloaded and set in its own folder. I can immediately throw it into any project without having to download it again. I do the same with OpenStreetMap layers. Obviously, OSM is quite a bit larger, so I do keep track of which parts of the world I am working in for a particular project and download data for those areas only, cycling it around as my focus changes. But if pre-saving data is setting aside your ingredients, making a template is arranging your kitchen. Creating a template is one of the best ways to shave time off your workflow. Most software has options to save files as a template, so it opens with that configuration every time you start the software. But even if it does not, you can create a template file, save it somewhere, and just copy it and rename it when you need. People will create their own paths when the existing one is inconvenient, and workflows behave the same way. But the same way you can't guess exactly where people will go until they do, you can't create the perfect template until you see how you work. You should not be making a template right from the get-go, but waiting, doing a couple projects, seeing what you're doing repeatedly, and then making that into a template. I have templates for every step of my workflow. Here is the template page for ArcGIS Pro. You see this whenever starting a new project. My Pro template is crafted to match my workflow. I have a main map set up with an extent map attached, folders for my layers, generic data linked already in the catalog pane, and a coordinate layer world UTM grid for reference. And then I also have customized the settings. Here I've adjusted the default font to match the Woodwell brand fonts, so every time I get new labels, I don't have to change the font. Then, once a project is created, I store it in a pre-made folder bundle. I put any exported images into the Canvas folder here, which is my catch-all for everything going into an actual image or animation for presentation. Blender contains a Blender template file and export folders. Logos is corporate branding. Notebooks is any scripts I'm using. Research is non-spatial data, like text PDFs or georeferenced images. Spatial data is my working data folder, and styles is where I store style files, which are used by ArcGIS products to contain color palettes and symbol presets. I have file templates as well. Here is the Photoshop template I have inside my Canvas folder. This is my standard setup, but I actually set up one specifically for the 30-day map challenge that was essentially the same, but had some styled text boxes, so I could paste in data sources and titles. Again, pay close attention to your workflow and how it changes, and constantly be updating your templates to match. I grew up playing PC video games, and a big part of gaming culture is finding out how to cut down on those tiny moments of delay between your mind and realizing those ideas in the software. In many games, this is for competitive reasons, but in design, the benefit is making it easier to enter and stay in a flow state where you can freely explore and develop ideas without getting stalled by the tools you're using. Key to this strategy is key bindings. This is your Control-S to save in Windows, for example. If you find yourself doing an action repeatedly, see if there is a key binding for it. Then spend some time training yourself to use that key binding instead of doing it manually. Many software tools, like this page in Photoshop, have extensive customization options for key bindings. You can even adjust default bindings to fit your needs. I often like to have my left hand on the keyboard while the right hand moves the mouse. So I create key bindings concentrated on the left side of the keyboard, so I'm moving my hand as little as possible. You can also save custom key bindings and load different sets in Photoshop. Here's an example in ArcGIS Pro of how a simple shortcut can save a lot of time. It's always a pain to navigate stacks and stacks of open layers, but if you hold Control while the group of layers is selected and you left-click on that arrow, they're all minimized. This is a difference of 5 seconds versus 30, but if you're doing this again and again, that can multiply to hours of extra time you can spend elsewhere. Overall, however, I view how one mentally approaches decision-making to be as important and capable of adjustment as the actual process of design itself. Indeed, I think it is part of the process. I'm going to break this into two concepts. First, try to make as many decisions as possible into as simple ones as possible, and second, focus on completion. A map can be viewed as the culmination of many decisions, choices, what to include, what colors to use, what outlines to use, and so forth. If you simplify those decisions, you make your own work easier. This can be done by practicing quick-fire binary design decisions. If someone presents you 2 color palettes to paint a wall, you pick one, or really, you don't pick the other one. So you try and turn things into questions you can say yes to, or no. The map either has or does not have a roads. It has or does not have subnational boundaries. You approach issues in sequence and then break each one down in a way that you have clear options in front of you, rather than grasping at a solution out of this nebulous web of possibilities. And then if we think of map making as a collection of decisions, then it has a structure. And if it has a structure, then you can move along that, make a decision, and then revisit it down the line. I am going to make the ocean one color, but depending on what color I pick for land cover later on, I may go back, but for now, it's this. In the musical world, many artists run into this problem of creating a loop, a self-contained small segment, And they'll fiddle with that, and at the end of the day, they'll have a great loop, but they won't have a song. We want to make a map, a song. Perfection is the enemy of progress. You will always find that if you leave something, move on to another part of the design, and come back, you'll actually have a clearer idea of what you want that thing to be, rather than dwelling on it. Let's talk about this with an example as it relates to color. This is not a map I did for the 30-day map challenge, but I think it illustrates this sort of thinking. I had to show agricultural areas, urban areas, and sea level rise for a report on North Korea. My first thought is what I don't need. The answer there is easy. Since this map revolves around specific types of land cover, just get rid of everything that's not that. Then the question becomes, how do I color these classes? Agriculture, urban areas, and sea level rise. You need 3 colors that simultaneously pair well together with each other, but then they're also somewhat relating to what those variables represent in reality. So let's break it down by what colors don't work. If we take a basic color wheel, I know that I want sea level rise to be blue because it's water. So it has to be blue unless there's a really good reason for it not to be blue, which in this case there isn't, which means blue is taken off the board. We now have 2 colors we have left to pick out of the rest of the wheel. One has to be agriculture, and the other has to be urban areas. Let's consider red. Red's tricky. It works well with blue, but that would leave one of the other colors having to contrast against both of them, and both yellow and green don't work very well with red for color blindness issues and also in terms of general contrast. So red isn't going to work, which leaves yellow and green. But this actually works out great because not only do they work well with each other, but if we make agriculture green, then it maps pretty well with what agriculture is in reality, crops. Spend time figuring out one color, pair other colors against it, and find reasons to disqualify them. This all obviously applies only to hue, but the good news is, once you've cut down to part of the color wheel, then your overall options for brightness and saturation are cut down as well. By breaking down something this complex into simple choices, you can break through that mental barrier and work more efficiently. As useful as this information already is, there is one thing I have avoided: coding. This is because during the 30-day map challenge, I did a bit back then, but only recently have I come to appreciate its power. For example, this Python script running inside Pro let me spit out 20 deforestation maps that would have taken hours manually. I think every cartographer would benefit from a basic knowledge of code, and I'd recommend starting with Python. To conclude, I want to reiterate that not every map has to be thought of as this contained process of start and finish, nor do you have to, or should, think about cartography only as a time spent versus work accomplished formula. However, in professional contexts where you want to produce quality work to meet a set goal, like the 30-day map challenge, you can make that easier on yourself by maximizing time spent to where it'll have the most impact on the final product. You can prepare data ahead of time, customize your software, make efficient usage of shortcuts, and then adjust your conception mentally of map design to speed up and simplify your decision making. A lot of this may seem obvious, but I think that true excellence at a craft comes from simple principles skillfully applied, and having those simple principles spelled out clearly, rather than left for one to puzzle together on their own, can help everyone achieve excellence. Thank you very much.